knew everything about it. They mapped the most minute details. They logged what routes the compound's drivers and bodyguards took to get to work. They recorded what hours they were on duty each day. They tracked who they were assigned to guard. They even mapped the specific places where they liked to park their cars. A former CIA veteran explained the psychological reality of this operation. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle. You're putting all these scraps of information together. Where you lack reliable data, you look further into those gaps. It will be everything. How do they get food? What happens to their trash? We all get up and go to bed. We all eat and drink. Everything you do leaves a print. Israeli agents hacked their way into the local cell phone towers in the area around Pasteur Street, Union officials and their staff, in order to learn more about their movements. They collected huge quantities of raw data and fed it all into complex algorithms to automatically spot patterns. The machines painted a crystal clear, detailed picture of the enemy headquarters. The United States Central Intelligence Agency was equally relentless. The CIA used its own classified assets and technologies to keep close tabs on the Ayatollah. They tracked his movements, his meetings, and his deeply entrenched habits. They learned everything they could about how he lived, who he met with, and precisely when he was most likely to emerge from hiding. Days, weeks, and months went by. Two of the world's greatest intelligence forces watched from the shadows as Iran's officials went about their business. The agents patiently bided their time. They were waiting for that one window of opportunity that would at least enable them to orchestrate a successful strike. Then they spotted an anomaly. Israeli intelligence learned that Ali Khamenei was scheduled to attend a major meeting. A large contingent of top-tier Iranian officials was gathering at his surface-level compound on February 28th. The target list was staggering. Mohammad Pakpour, the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Aziz Nazirzadeh, the Iranian defense minister, Admiral Ali Shamkhani, the head of the country's military council, Syed Majid Musavi, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Aerospace Force commander, Mohammad Shirazi, Iran's deputy intelligence minister. Even the Ayatollah's direct family members were exposed. His son Mojtaba and his daughter Boshra, along with their spouses, were all expected at the same location. The CIA reportedly secured a vital human source on the ground. This asset confirmed the meeting was moving ahead on schedule and as planned. Some intelligence experts have suggested that a deeply embedded mole existed within the Ayatollah's inner circle, someone who eventually decided to betray him. Regardless of how they secured the intel, this was the moment the US and Israel had been waiting for. This was their golden opportunity. They could permanently cripple the country's entire leadership group in one violent swoop. They simply could not afford to miss. It was a once-in-a-lifetime shot. They had already been quietly putting plans in place for an attack on Iran. Originally, they planned to begin their assault at night under the cover of darkness. But this new opportunity shattered that strategy. Mere days before the operation was set to launch, the US and Israel completely adjusted their tactical plans. They scrapped the night raid. Instead, they would attack in the bright light of day. They chose the moment the Iranian officials would least expect them. As the fatal launch date drew nearer, Israel and the US kept their plans a fiercely guarded secret. They could not run even the slightest risk of their true intentions being leaked. If the Iranian regime caught even a slight sniff of what their enemies had planned, the February 28th meeting would be instantly cancelled. The Ayatollah would be swiftly secured deep inside his underground bunker. He would be placed far beyond the reach of even the mightiest Israeli ballistic missiles. The US and Israel successfully kept every piece of information tightly under wraps. But daylight created a fatal vulnerability. By the time the Israeli jets entered Tehran's airspace, the morning was proceeding exactly as planned. Various high-ranking Iranian officials had already arrived at the Khamenei compound. The sprawling complex was made up of multiple heavily fortified buildings. It included the offices of the Iranian presidency. It housed the National Security Council. The supreme leader himself operated out of a separate structure. Many officials were gathered together in one of the main buildings. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was isolated in his separate office. This was at 9:30 a.m. local time. The physical separation of the targets did not matter in the slightest. The Israeli fighters carried enough Sparrow missiles to raise the entire compound straight down to the bedrock. The Iranians never saw the executioners coming. They had spent decades being relentlessly trained to expect attacks in the evenings or overnight. None of them expected their sworn enemies to orchestrate a decapitation strike in broad daylight. But a daytime strike forced a major issue. If any civilian or guard spotted the inbound threats, they could make a single phone call. The Ayatollah takes his 5-minute elevator ride. The mission is a failure. Months of planning and years of intelligence will be wasted. The US and Israel needed total radio silence on the ground. Israeli and US intelligence agents simultaneously launched a digital kill switch. They weaponized their control over local cell phone towers. They disrupted all digital service in the area surrounding Pasteur Street. They choked the network with dead static. Even if a panicked guard tried to desperately call security teams to warn them of an impending attack, even if they tried to reach Khamenei's elite bodyguards, they simply would not have been able to get through. They digitally shut down the entire neighborhood and the invisible trap snapped shut. At 9:40 a.m., the kinetic strikes began. The high-altitude fighter jets fired their payloads. Dozens of advanced Sparrows sped directly toward the Khamenei compound at breakneck speed. In a matter of seconds, several of these precision air-to-surface missiles successfully made contact with their targets. They instantly transformed concrete buildings that had stood strong for decades into piles of smoldering rubble. Oded Ilam, the former head of the Mossad counterterrorism division, summed up the terrifying reality of modern warfare. 60 seconds, that's all it took for this operation. But it's the product of years in the making. The modern battlefield is no longer defined by tanks and aircraft alone. It's defined by data, access, trust, and timing. 1 minute can change a region. And so it definitively did. Gigantic plumes of thick black smoke choked the air. Civilians across the surrounding areas watched the destruction in shock and fright. In the blink of an eye, Khamenei's legendary compound was erased. The space that had been a safe refuge for him and his officials was gone. So was Khamenei himself. Those few inside the compound that had miraculously managed to survive the initial salvos scrambled wildly to find shelter. Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, was one of those statistical anomalies. He had stepped outside for a breath of fresh air mere moments before the ballistic missiles arrived. He suffered a severe leg injury. He lost his father, his wife, and his own son in the blast. He managed to drag himself out of the rubble alive. Ali Khamenei himself had zero chance of survival. At the age of 86, his life came to a sudden, violent end alongside many of his closest and most important officials. In a single strike, the head of the Iranian state was cleanly severed. Satellite imagery in the immediate aftermath revealed the apocalyptic extent of the damage. In the hours that followed, US and Israeli forces carried out countless additional airstrikes and bombing runs on Iran's air defenses, radars, military compounds, and other important infrastructure. Those that remained of the regime scrambled to form a temporary three-person council to demonstrate some semblance of control. They elected Mojtaba Khamenei as their new supreme leader. A decapitation strike on day one of a war is the ultimate military checkmate. This is the same perfection Vladimir Putin expected when he ordered the invasion of Ukraine. He expected a flawless 60-second victory. He walked directly into a bloodbath. To see how a massively outgunned Ukrainian military set a brutal trap that completely broke the Russian war machine on day one.